Politics, protest, and
Pot-pourri.
I'm your host, Cordelia, and
I'm Leslie McClan.
So we have a special guest in tonight, a freelance journalist and former intern for Eugene Weekly, Mike Bivens. Go ahead and say hi to the guests. And
hi. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I remember when I started covering the protests and whatnot for the Vanguard, and then you reached out to my former editor, Anna, and you're like, I know that guy.
There's
Absolutely.
a couple hot topics going on with the vape cartridge concerns. The chemicals in there can break down into something like formaldehyde. Is that what you said?
There was a study out of PSU's chemistry department. I actually found this right after our last episode that we explored.
A few episodes ago when we
explored the pot topic. Your thoughts on that one? Right now?
I mean, well, it's kind of scary for one.
Did you know that there is another push? I know this happens a lot, but there's another push for legalization at the federal level. There was a Washington Post article that came out, and it was written by Paul Armentano, the deputy director of NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
So, I mean, do you think we need, greater regulation? Are we going towards that?
I remember a few years ago when I heard horror stories about vape pens when they first hit the market. There were batteries that were blowing up, and there was also popcorn lung.
And specifically, it's a chemical, vitamin E acetate or something like
that. It has to do with.
And it's like, what else are these people doing? You know,
market.
Is smoking, is vaping the most bad thing that people are doing? And one thing that I have written about, back to the terpenes. The weed has terpenes in it naturally, right? You know, they distill it and then they'll add the terpenes back in.
Right.
But a lot of the time, what they're doing is they're not even adding. Weed-based, they're not adding cannabis-derived terpenes.
Every level when it comes to cannabis is a little bit of a Wild West because every state and every jurisdiction within the state has the authority to do it a little different.
I did some reporting of the International Cannabis Business Conference for the Vanguard. Did you ever work for the Vanguard?
I mean, I did freelance, not a freelance, whatever, contributor, whatever they called it. I was doing sports news.
The protests here in town. Between Antifa, Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer. I mean, you've been following this whole thing since, I think it was pretty much from the start, wasn't it?
I figure all this has been here. It's just been kind of latent, just kind of barely noticeable, kind of like an undercurrent. And then once Trump got elected, it just boiled over and came back to the surface. But really the first time I saw, left-wing versus right-wing extremist violence was in 2016 downtown by the Salmon Springs Fountain. Is that what that's called?
Salmon Springs, I think it is.
Salmon Fountain, the main fountain downtown. It was kind of similar to what was going on lately in all this goes on downtown and the police don't do a whole lot, but sometimes they do. But back then they let them fight for 40 or 50 minutes.
Did you see any of some of the climate strike protests that went on the 20th? In downtown here in Portland?
I mean, I saw some tweets. There was some action on the Hawthorne Bridge, I guess.
Corey was down there.
Yeah, I was down filming just as they were going to march up onto the Hawthorne Bridge. It was literally live streaming for 20 minutes, dude. There was thousands.
That's a popular bridge for protest, just because it's easier to go in the street.
A small faction of Youth Liberation Front or Antifas that was down there clashing with DHS over at the ICE facility and whatnot.
Most enjoyable protest for you to cover.
Oh man, I don't necessarily know that I enjoy any of them, because I mean the thing is I swear to God, when I covered Trump down when he went to Eugene in 2016, I was out there, and I swear to God, I had heat exhaustion or something. Every time I've thought to myself oh, is it going to stop? I feel like it's cyclical. It's the ebb and flow. It's almost like a religious experience, because you put everything aside. Yes, for legit. I feel like it's sometimes it's like a religious experience, because you're hurting your body, for the greater good.
As a freelance journalist, we kind of appreciate that opinion. That's sort of why we invited you on the podcast here to share with us your perspective. KBOO Portland.